This show is for the sales leader who knows they have a pivotal role in driving outstanding sales results. Getting hired or promoted to manage a sales team is a big accomplishment, but you know you have to work hard to become a great sales leader. You are listening to the Divine Comedy of Sales podcast. Here's your host, coach, and advisor to elite sales leaders from around the world, Matt McDarby.
Hello and welcome to the Divine Comedy of Sales podcast. I'm Matt McDarby, veteran seller, leader, coach, and advisor to elite sales leaders all over the world. I'm so excited to have you listening. In our latest season of interview episodes, I'm going to be asking some of the same questions about lessons learned, some of the great challenges that the leaders I'm interviewing have overcome. Who did they learn from? But there's one important question that I'm adding to the mix, and it's essentially, what are the most important parts of your system? And this is my way of bringing systems thinking, which has been a recurring theme of the last several episodes, into our conversations with highly effective and successful sales leaders. Why am I doing that? I'm doing that to help you clarify in your own mind, what are the key elements in your system? What does your sales leader's operating system look like? I'm really excited to have you listening in on these conversations. So I hope you love this season of interviews. Our very next guest is coming up right now. I invited my next guest to the show for a few reasons. First, we share a few things in common. We've both had long careers in sales and sales leadership. We both have strong personal ties to the New York metropolitan area. We're both alumni of the University of Delaware. Go Blue Hens. But I also invited her because her industry focus has been so different than mine. I'm certain we can learn something new from her today. Loree has had a very successful selling and leadership career, including roles in the apparel industry, representing brands like Fila and BCBG, Tommy Hilfiger, and Guess. She has served as a senior vice president at e-commerce startups focused on the retail industry. She's led sales for global firms and North American firms, most recently leading sales for an omni-channel retail customer experience firm. Please welcome Loree Lash-Valencia. Loree, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt. Excited to be here.
You know, it's funny, people can't see this. We've got our UD Delaware ties. I'm also drinking from my Delaware cup, which I don't always, but coincidentally, I have it on my desk while we're talking. Isn't that funny?
Amazing.
So a lot of great talent coming out of UD, if I may say so myself.
I agree. I actually, I shouldn't say favorite, but one of my favorite sales team, someone on my sales team is also a Blue Hen.
What we're going to do today is just have a conversation and try to pull some of the things that you've learned, things that you've experienced, and make them relevant for the people listening to the show. So if it's okay, I'm just going to dive in and ask you some questions and get the conversation going. Okay?
Let's do it.
Awesome. All right. So for those who've listened to the show, you know that I'm asking a question about systems thinking kind of at the start of every conversation. And the reason I ask is the best sales leaders that I've observed, I've had a chance to work with over the years, have a way of making sense of all of the sort of interconnected parts of the sales organization. They have a system, right? A way of diagnosing, tuning, making changes so the whole system sort of works well together. And they do that specifically and intentionally, to deliver the business result they're hired to deliver. So Loree, you've been a really successful seller and leader in a variety of industries, right? And ones that I haven't worked in. What are the most important parts of your system?
I find this a really interesting question because you use the word system. And I think anyone that's in sales, I don't know, how many sales books do you have on your shelf,
too many. Entirely too many.
Exactly. Like there's so many. And we can talk about what are our favorite, methods. Is it Challenger? Is it Spin? Is it, one of my favorites is Gap? But you didn't ask about that. You asked about what's the system. So I thought about when I come into a company to lead a sales team and grow their revenue, what are the first few things I do? Or, how do I approach that? And I think it's kind of analytical yet adaptive. I think you look at the end result you're trying to achieve and then reverse engineer how to get there. So you can kind of say, what levers can I pull? And not really accepting on face value. You really need to probe deeply, but also move fast, right? Because everyone hires you and they want immediate results. So you balance like really figuring out what's going on and then provide impact quickly. So besides reverse engineering, like I think I look at obviously the pipeline, right? So let's talk about the pipeline part because it's never what it appears to be, or at least in my experience, it's not, right? See how big the pipeline is, but once you dive into that, you will see so many dead deals or like so many things that, have happy ears and they think they're progressing and they're not. So I think you need to be, and I didn't make this phrase up. It's a friend of mine, like a pipeline surgeon. You need to like hop in and diagnose that quickly so that you know what you can lean into and what you have to get the team off of. And also by looking at that, where can you impact, like maybe get in and like help them close some deals. But the other thing I've seen time and time again is really challenging. Do they know who they are as a business? I often come in and feel that they have not clearly defined their unique value proposition. And that is not common language across the sales team. So that's one of the very first things I do because I've seen it time and time again. Like everybody else is speaking about their value prop in a different way. And then I diagnose, do we really know who our ideal customer profile is? Because that's the other thing. If those things aren't really clear and defined, or you just need to address that in some capacity. At least that's what I found. How does that resonate with you?
Yeah, no, it does. I think about the environments where I've led and sold too, but where I've led that have been most challenging. It's been the ones where executive leadership either didn't know who they really wanted to be, who they are, or who they wanted to be known as, or what they wanted to be known for, or they did at one point and they let a lot of time pass and they lost touch with what the market actually thought they were. And then they looked at sales. They were like, what do you mean you can't differentiate? What do you mean you don't know who are, right? So no, that definitely resonates with me. Tell me more, right? That's a key part of the system. So you described reverse engineering, like I understand what we're trying to achieve, but you just said that really understanding and challenging the business. Do they know who they are? And therefore, who is our ideal customer, et cetera? What else? What else is important?
Yeah. So again, when you do that kind of exercise of unique value prop, if you will, and I love that term because it's unique value prop, right? Because they might come at you with like, this is what we do. And it's always like, at least being in SaaS, because I've spent a lot of time in SaaS, is that's a feature. Like you have to keep smacking their hand. Like, don't tell me about a feature. How does that provide value for that customer? Like what? So why do they care? And why are they going to part with their money? And like keep almost like peeling the onion on that. And how is that defensible? Okay, great. That's who you are. Who says so? And how can we prove that? Because as a sales team, like there's so much that sales team has to do. They have to go in, break through, get that moment together, get some rapport, and then provide that value. Like, see if there's even a problem. I mean, we could go on and on and on. See if there's really a problem there that you can solve for them. But if we don't clearly know what we're solving, there's so much lost. And I find it time and time again, it's exactly where they are, that they don't even realize that that is such a huge hurdle that you can be a super skilled salesperson, but you're not going to breach that gap if it's not clear to the business.
No, and you said at the top of this when you started the answer to the what's in your system, you said the system has to be, I think you said, analytical and adaptive.
Yeah.
Tell me more about, because the analytical part jumps right out, right? We've got to go deep into the pipeline. We've really got to understand who we are, who our ideal customer is, so on, right? And analyze until we achieve clarity on those things. Tell me about the adaptability part, though. What are the things that you're adapting to? Why did you say adaptive, that the system has to be adaptive?
Yeah. I don't know if it's been my experience. It probably has been my experience, maybe not everybody that's been on the show, is I tend to work with, I don't say early companies. I think they've established a value, they've sold, now they're scaling, right? But they're still looking to close that product loop a little bit. They still have things to learn about where they sit in the marketplace, whether that's around, is pricing right? Should we offer consulting? Is there other services? And I think that's where you need to be a bit adaptive to really understanding the problems that customer is facing. And is your solution right the exact way it is? Or is there some modifications? Or are there things you can bring back to your product team and say, I think if we added this, did that, there's that level of adaptability, I think, in the product offering. And then we could also take the word adaptive to the sales team, right? In terms of how are they communicating? How are they adapting? Again, nothing horrifies me more than like listening to a sales team that's a robot that is not active listening, that's not adapting their entire conversation to what they're hearing.
Adapt the strategy, adapt the offering, adapt the tactics as necessary. Incidentally, I hear from people that listen to the show, right? And I know that many of them come from environments similar to where you've led and succeeded, and that'll resonate, I think, right? So it's like build a system. The intention is not to be rigid.
Yeah.
The intention is to get the system to a point where everything you learn is an input to improving the system. So that's a great thing that you've learned over time. So let's get on to maybe there are other important things you've learned over the years. So what do you think is the most important lesson you've learned so far about leading a sales team?
Well, a sales team is a very unique thing in a way. So I guess if we're talking about the sales team part, it's a lot of work to understand and align individual motivation with a sales team. Right. So I often think about it as a family, right? A family dynamic, right? You've got a group of people and they're different, right? So one of the things that as a sales leader or as a salesperson, I tend to be all in. I always have been. I'm like this super loyal person. But not everyone you hire is, and I think that was like an awakening for me because, you're excited, you've reverse engineered, you can see the win, you are so in to make it happen. And then you're going along with the sales team. And I've come across where I'm like, I just don't think they have that level of commitment. So I think it's like super important that you can understand the individuals on your sales team, what motivates them individually, why are they here, what's important for them, because I've made an assumption that we're all kind of drinking the Kool-Aid and looking at the North Star, and I don't think that's true. So I think that's been a really valuable thing to learn so that I could adapt how I can mentor, motivate, reward, get that orchestra to work better together.
Yeah. I infer from something else you said there that it's not only acknowledging that they have people at different levels of commitment to the mission, but they also have different motivators and they're trying to achieve different things for themselves. And even though, incidentally, right, a lot of the people that I talk to on this show, they're selected because they've been successful leaders. So they are a little different, wired a little differently, right? Just a little bit more committed, a little bit more willing to sort of throw themselves fully in. But there are things we can do to get people who maybe aren't willing to go to the same lengths, aren't interested, but at least get them bought in. So you talked about aligning sort of, if I heard it right, aligning the team or the group's goals with individual goals in so many words. Tell us more about that. Like, how do you do that?
And it's funny that you can see, I've seen my career progress. So it's not that long ago that this, I don't want to say epiphany, but the circumstances played out so that I learned this lesson. And, part of is how you set up your team and that feedback loop. And I assume we've all bumped into Radical Candor at some point, right? That book. And I don't think I've ever achieved it fully, but I really do strive for this open dialogue, really enforcing this ability to speak freely and learn from our mistakes and learn quickly and fail together, all of that. But if you don't understand, when you make assumptions about what's important to somebody, you're often so wrong, so being able to get close enough that you can be that direct and they can be that direct in telling you what really matters to them. And I've seen that in terms of, and it could be little things. I remember this one guy and he just wasn't all that productive. And, it was still early in the relationship. So I think he was posturing to be like this, no. When I got under it, he just wanted to work from home a lot more than was what the organization wanted at that point, that kind of transition off of COVID. And I could do that. Like he could be more productive if he was, but it took him a lot to get around to that. Or somebody else, like I tried to after they've been there a while, right? So they've been in the business a while, they're producing. How do you keep them inspired? So there was somebody else, and I'm like, what do you want to do? And she really wanted to own a region. Like she really wanted to move up the ladder. There wasn't really anywhere to go at that moment, but I could create something within the team that was hers. So I think really understanding those things that you can do that give them a sense of excitement and ownership in the business that have proved dynamically good in my experience.
And it sounds like the other thing is like you ask them.
Yeah.
Right. Like really simple. It's the thing that people listening can repeat. How do I understand what matters to this person? I've got to have a conversation with them about it. Because in the one example, the gentleman you were talking about, like pretty common, people don't always reveal what they're after or what's important to them because there's risk maybe, or they don't know how, right? And until their leader, their coach approaches them and demonstrates some interest and just asks, they're not going to tell you.
And often, I don't know, again, if this is your experience, like often you're brought in and a big portion of that team exists. So they're there before you are and they're feeling you out and they've made assumptions and there's like a lot of baggage. So you want to get in there and really have an authentic relationship as quickly as possible to be able to like have them trust to tell you anything, or they're not going to tell you the truth. And that it'll take you a bit of time to figure out too.
Yeah. Trust takes time to build, doesn't it?
Driving great sales results is hard. Doing it consistently is even harder. There are so many obstacles that can prevent you from becoming the most effective sales leader you can be. Find practical advice you can apply right away by picking up your copy of Matt's book, The Divine Comedy of Sales, at www.divinecomedyofsales.com.
So, you talked earlier about how your experience, which lines up with mine, that you get into organizations and you realize, wow, maybe I may be the most committed to the mission here compared to others. And that's not right, or it's just a fact, right? It just is. But I attribute that to, it's not just like who you are, but you really love the idea of leading. You love the idea of kind of building and growing. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. What do you love most about leading people, salespeople, leading teams?
It's funny because I think people are wired certain ways. So we're wired that way because I'm not going to name names, but I know people that are just like hate that part. They really hate leading people or dealing with people's dramas. I know fantastic IC people that are just like, just let me I'll sell all day long, but I don't want to manage people.
Yeah, I see individual contributors.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Right?
I assume everyone.
Okay. No, it sounded like I see people. I was like, wait a minute, what are we talking about?
Individual contributors, right? That love that space. But I really do love people, and I do really love watching them grow. But I also, on a personal, I love winning, right? I think any sales leader loves that kind of the charge you get from hitting your number, and the reset every freaking month, of here we go again, and like to win.
Yeah.
But since every good sales leader has a decent sized sales team, and then watching them grow is really kind of exciting because sales is grueling, right? So you have when it goes well, and it doesn't always go well, So when it goes well, it's super exciting, but more often than not, it's challenging as hell. Like there's a lot of ghosting, there's a lot of depression, there's a lot of negative things. But watching people work through that, you help them work through that to come out the other side, and how they grow from that is pretty exciting as well, in their careers.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I think what you're describing is sort of the I've heard in other contexts described as the inner game and the outer game.
Well, tell me more.
And I think this is something that people in sales or who lead salespeople understand fully because they live it every day. People in other functions, and I'm not knocking other functions, I have to say this because it comes out sometimes the wrong way. Finance, marketing, ops, whatever. They look at what we do and they just feel like they're coin operated. They just sort of get things done, or there's this dark art that they practice over there and the numbers show up. But what I mean by the inner game and the outer game is, the outer game is what people see. It's, how does a salesperson interact with their teammates? How do they interact with customers? How do they interact with prospects? How effective are they? How efficient and active are they? Then there's the inner game, which is all that stuff that's playing in my brain, the things that give me call reluctance, that make me not want to prospect as much, the things that make me nervous as hell when we've got a big presentation coming up or when I'm trying to gain access to some C-suite executive. That's all the stuff I have to kind of, and a lot of us, our inclination is to keep that inside. The best coaches are the ones who are able to sort of pull some of that out. And let's talk through why you're struggling with X, right? And that's the part of the job that I think other people in other functions will never really fully understand, which is the inner game part of it. What do you think about that?
Thanks for explaining it that way. No, it's so true. It's so psychological. And that's the thing that honestly you grow the most from, right? Because it's like you're encountering these challenging aspects time and time again. And I've seen a clear differentiator between the people I think go on to really succeed. And that's their curiosity about how they could do better, what I did wrong. And there was one guy that I worked with, he was young and he was so open. He was so charming and so open. And God, in front of my eyes, the guy blossomed so incredibly. But I think it was because he was so incredibly curious and open and then willing to get out there and try it. Like I really felt like this is what true coaching is. Being able to suggest things, listen to things together, and then be like, okay, now you go do that. You can do that. And then just watching him take off, both like when we work together, take off and just become a real wealthy, like he just crushed his numbers. He just became the top salesperson. And now he's just moved on and is doing great. So,
yeah. Well, I think in that example, right, you were the leader. What others who were listening now can take away from that is the leader, you have to have an eye for that, right? That curiosity that leads to people being willing to learn from others. One of the best things you can also do is modeling that, right? Being curious, wanting to learn, humble enough to learn and prepare, right? And try things you haven't done, because that sends a really powerful message to the people on the team that, well, I'm doing it. It's good. If it's good enough for me, right? And we should certainly be trying it as a team. So good. Okay. That's great. You said earlier words to the effect that this is a challenging profession, challenging role. I think, and I'll go further and say, I think the sales manager's job, whether you're a frontline manager or a leader of leaders, it's not only the most important, but it is the most difficult and challenging role in the business. Period. Now, I've never been an accountant, okay? I'm not a controller. I'm sure other people will be like, well, here are the reasons why this, but I'm telling people it is the pivotal and the most challenging role. What have you found to be the most challenging part of leading people, and what have you done about it?
All right, two different things here. Because one is, I'll start with, I don't know which one to start with, but anyway, challenging is when the dynamics are off. Because like I talked about before, that they're all individual and different. And I don't know that it's vanity. It's just, what you know. So like if everybody thought like then it would be really easy because everything you communicate would be understood exactly the way you want to communicate it. It would lead to a not diverse team, which would be really shitty, but your ability to communicate would be so easy. And I think what I've found is when I get up against people that just don't think the way I do, like that's really challenging. One, to realize it. And then two, to realize that what I'm saying and my intention is not being heard the way I intend, or I'm not maybe reading the signs of how they're picking up. And it was like team dynamics. And there was so much drama between these team dynamics that I was like, why can't I get them to just get over this? You know what I mean? It was such a challenging thing. So I think that has been the most challenging, is when like you're trying to, and you've got a goal, you're trying to crush numbers, you're trying to like make the whole thing work, and you're dealing with drama that you can't, you have to respect, but you just want to make,
make it go away. So what do you do about it? What do you do about it?
Radical candor. You just have to talk, and you just have to hear it out, and you just have to, be human about it and humble, like you said, literally this conversation that I am struggling to understand why you are so unhappy and why this matters so much to you. And that could be on me, but help me figure this out so that we can figure this out. And I think another, to switch a little bit, how do I deal with what's challenging? I think it's like super important to grow and surround yourself with people that'll challenge you. I'm part of networks. I love to be around other sales leaders because I don't know everything. And like every single encounter allows me to grow. And I find hanging out with people that, have been doing this, you will pick things up, or you'll have, this board of directors or people that can challenge you and you can bounce things off because, man, it's hard to do alone. I think you have to accept you do not have all the answers. Do not try to posture that you do, and allow yourself to learn from other great leaders.
Yeah. Humility again, I think, right? In a little bit of a different form, but I don't have all the answers it's a first important step. I was talking with somebody else just earlier this week about, it was kind of a related situation. And he was talking about his sort of maturation as a leader, and how at the beginning of his journey, it was all about, when he was first promoted into a first line management role, it was all about making sure people knew what he knew what his strengths were and his capabilities were. And he's like, the longer I've done this job, I realized that was completely the wrong orientation to the role. It was 180 degrees from the way I should have been looking at the role. I should have been more interested in what they know and reflecting to them that I didn't know a lot, but I was interested, right? And I was willing to learn, including from them. So look, I think that's a point that's going to resonate with people who are listening to this show, because they're listening to this show to learn from other people. That's the whole premise of the show. So I think that's all well stated. We're coming up on time here. We've only got time maybe for one more question. So I'm going to ask you my purposely big, open, vague question I ask at the end of every one, which is, what else, Loree? What else do we need to know that maybe you haven't had a chance to share just yet?
What else people need to know?
What else would you like them to know about selling, leadership, things that you've learned?
I often say, will this matter in 5 years? I think there's so much intensity to accept the role of the revenue responsibility for a company. It's a really big role, right? And then you've got the sales team. It's very high pressure. But I think every now and then it just pays to be this challenge I'm dealing with right this second, is it really going to matter 5 years from now? And give yourself a little grace, right? And just be curious and brave, right? Because again, I think some of the biggest things that always eat at us are that, should I pick up the phone and just ask? Should I not be afraid of this person? Put yourself in their shoes. The simplest thing, right? How many times, what was the biggest realization as we're doing lead gen, that you need to call someone 12 times before they actually answer you, that it's not about you, it's really about them, and there can be a million other things going on in their life, and it has nothing to do with you. And that is born out of experience in sales, but I can't tell you how many times I've told that to my daughter or family or friends or this. I think there are so many lessons that I've learned being in a sales leadership role. And I think salespeople, sales leadership, learning persistence and perseverance and resilience and grit and negotiation and empathy and camaraderie and hustle. There was once a point in my time, because I started as a designer, that's another cool thing. I started on the creative side, and I thought, salespeople, like you said, the black, dark arts. It was really born out of passion. I was passionate about what we were building, and I wanted to tell people about it. And that somehow segued into a career in sales. And I've come a full 360 for respect for what we do. It is so challenging and transforming. So I think if anybody is listening and thinks oh, we're slimy salespeople, or salespeople are slimy, or this isn't a valuable thing to do, a valuable career, that they're really wrong. It's full of creative, passionate, humble people that are trying to achieve great things.
Yeah. Yeah. And many of us are underdogs. We're not necessarily coming from the Ivy League, that sort of pedigree. We're coming from kind of normal places. And I don't even know who said this, but nothing happens till somebody sells something.
I haven't heard that.
There's a business adage. I have no idea. I'll have to look it up now that I've said it and give credit where it's due and when I summarize. But yeah, look, I'm with you. And we do important work for a business, for the people we serve, the people we work for our customers. But will this matter in 5 years? It's a great question, right? It's important, but unless you're selling equipment that's used in, heart surgery, for most of us, this is not a life or death proposition here, what we're doing.
Well, I think I think for your sales team too, like, that hurts when something goes wrong and they're dwelling, or even us, like you miss a target and like you just feel awful and you're like, but will this moment matter 5 years? No, like shake this off. Something great is around the corner.
Yeah.
Like go to the gym and then just come back fresh.
Yeah. Yeah. Bounce back. So important. Resilience in this role, right? Loree, this has been fantastic. I've loved the conversation. Now I have the task of, I'm going to boil down maybe the top few things that you shared with us today and challenge our listeners to think about how do they apply it to their environment. So I definitely learned a ton today and so appreciate you joining. Thank you so much for joining the show. I said at the top, one of the reasons that I was drawn to Loree as a guest on the show was, in addition to all the things that we share in common, there are some really different experiences that she's had, industries that she's worked in that I know absolutely nothing about. And so she had some really unique insights. And also there were some common ideas or themes, things that we've heard from other leaders from other industries. But there are a few things I want to pull out here, and they're sort of out of order in the way she said them, but I'm starting with the thing that struck me most. She said, kind of midway through the conversation, Loree said, curiosity is why people succeed. The more I think about that, I'm like, yeah, that is, and that may be one of the sort of unwritten or hidden criterion that we should be using when we're trying to identify successful people to join our organizations, either in selling roles or in leadership roles. Curiosity is why people succeed. My experience has been coming into new environments, especially the people that are able to sort of fight through the lack of clarity or to get clear about what's expected of them, who are asking the right questions early on, who are asking the right questions of customers, are the people who are ultimately the most curious. They're the ones who succeed. So hadn't thought of it at all until Loree said it. I think it's brilliant. When we talked about her system, she offered a couple of ideas of the key elements in the system, but also offered some sort of themes or characteristics of the system. She said that system, whatever includes, has to be analytical and adaptive. She recommends starting with the goal in mind. Yep, that resonates for sure. Probe deeply, but move fast. And the pipeline is a key element, of course. It's never what it appears to be on the surface. And we have to overcome a key challenge, which is to understand who our ideal customer profile is and what is our unique value to them. So a lot there to unpack. But in Loree's system, right, we have to have the ICP right. We have to understand our unique value prop or UVP. We have to be analytical and adaptive. We have to start with the goal in mind. So you've got some sort of concrete elements of the system, and then some that are a little bit more abstract, but we know what she means. So I love how she described her system. One of the things that she said she's learned is that it's really difficult, but super important to align the team's goals or the group's goals with individual goals. How does she do that? By asking and seeking to understand what is important to each individual member of the team. Again, she's done this in different industries, but I think about my own experience, my best days as a leader when I'm really tuning into the things that motivate my people. That's what I'm doing too. And I think we've heard versions of this from other leaders who've been on the show. So the big challenge here is, how do you do that in your environment, right? Loree made reference to sometimes the dynamics are off. We just have to speak candidly between one another to try to get to the heart of the matter. Very similar idea with respect to understanding people's individual motivators. How do we do that? We have a conversation about it. We speak candidly, we ask, we listen, we share. If we're being truthful in both directions, then we can kind of work through issues where we're not aligned or where the dynamics are in need of some improvement. So the challenge for you is, how do you take these lessons that Loree has shared and apply them to your environment? Do they resonate with you? Why? What are you going to do next? So I want to thank Loree for being an excellent guest, as I thought she would be, in today's podcast. In our next episode, I will be speaking with an old colleague of mine from back in my days at Huthwaite, who was an up-and-comer back then, but man, has he had a fantastic career since leaving and taking all of those things that we learned together, and has had a remarkable career as a leader ever since. I hope you join us for that conversation. In the meantime, I'm Matt McDarby, host and author of The Divine Comedy of Sales. Thank you so much for joining. Bye-bye for now.